I just want to start by saying thank you for having me here today. It's always nice to participate in an opportunity where there's people who are very motivated and know that your participation in organizations such like this are things that employers are always looking for, so it's going to also help further your job search strategies. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about Walmart Canada. We're a small company, not many people have heard of us, but it's my opportunity to have a little shameless plug about Walmart and then just walk through some of the different steps, preparing before you go to the interview, the actual interview, the different types. I also went and talked to other HR professionals I've worked with, other employers, and some of my recruiters and asked them questions about do's and don'ts in interviews. So I'm going to share some of those with you and then just talk to you a little bit about to disclose or not to disclose, and then we'll do questions afterwards. So Walmart Canada is actually started as Woolco. In 1994, Walmart from the US came in and purchased 122 stores. We now have over 300 stores across Canada. And Walmart has a very pragmatic approach to diversity. For us, diversity is about creating a culture of inclusion. It comes from our basic belief from Sam Walton, who started our company. He believed in respect for the individual, but it also comes from a very pragmatic place for us as well. We know that for us to be the best retailers in the world, we have to represent the communities that we live in, and so we have a store of the community philosophy. My job is to make sure that the people that we employ reflect the communities that we work in, and that means representing all Canadians. When I went and started talking to different people about preparing for the interview, overwhelmingly what they said is they like it when people research. When they spend the time to research the company, find out more about the position and the salary expectations. This is an opportunity for you to differentiate yourself from other people. Most people do this quite poorly. They don't take the time to find out about the company. They may just go to the website. Working for Walmart Canada, a lot of people have assumptions about who we are. And so they won't do any research because they shopped in one of their stores and they think that that means that they understand who Walmart Canada is. It's also important that you ask the person who's setting up the interview. If a recruiter's talked to you and done a pre-screen and they're setting up the interview, ask them what more details about the position. Ask them what they think you should know and prepare for the interview. They can also give you an idea of salary expectations. It's always that really awkward part that no one likes to do because you never want to undervalue yourself, but you don't want to price yourself out of the market. So never hesitate to ask questions. It's also important that you take time to rehearse. You know, our parents always told us that practice makes perfect, and it's true in an interview session as well. Practice answering some different questions. Know your resume and know your experience. Review the job description and take notes during your research. Make sure you present yourself and understand what the employer is looking for. And then go through your experience and start to identify what you've done that helps you demonstrate that. Sarah talked about knowing your strengths and weaknesses, and it's important that you review those kinds of things before you go into the interview. Employers are looking for you to be able to represent how you're going to do the job, and you need to make sure you practice that before you do that. Shamelessly use the people in your network. Use your friends and family so that they can interview you. I've done that numerous times. I had my friends ask me questions that I think are going to be asked when I go to a job interview, and it helps. The other thing that's nice about practicing is it makes you less nervous when you go into the situation. And do mock interviews. Julie mentioned Career Services have excellent programs to support you. I used to work for the University of Guelph, and one of my favorite things that we used to do were mock interviews. Students would come in and we would ask them questions and help prepare them for interviews. I actually used to do that for the veterinary program and learned a lot about how to tell if a cow is pregnant because I had to ask questions about pregnancy screening in cows. But it's a good opportunity for you to sort of calm your nerves and get ready for the big interview. It's also important that you prepare yourself to ask questions and to understand what you want to know about the company. Things may come up while you're doing the research. You need to make sure that this opportunity works for you as well. I often describe recruiting as sort of like a dating service. And so my job as a recruiter is to sort of put people together and to form successful relationships. And it's not just an opportunity for us as the employers to evaluate you. You need to come into an interview ready to evaluate the employer. If you're not going to be happy working for a company, it's not going to be a good match for you, no matter how much you think that that's a job that you should be taking. So come in prepared to ask questions. Find out more about the context of the role. Find out what a good job looks like. And it's always a good idea to ask the person interviewing you why they work for the company. It gives you a unique perspective, and everybody's story is a bit different. I always tell my hiring managers that they're the greatest advocates of working at Walmart because they can tell their own personal story about how Walmart has helped promote their career. The other thing about preparing, it also displays your interest in the company. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't do this, so it's also your chance to stand out. Plan ahead, your wardrobe. So the number one feedback that I got from hiring managers and other recruiters was research. The second was wardrobe. Dress appropriately. You don't have to go out and buy an expensive suit, but make sure you're showing up in clean clothes. Always dress sort of one level higher. That's what my coach always says. If it's a very casual environment, make sure that you're coming in dress pants and a shirt. If it's a semi-casual environment, come in a suit. It's one of those occasions where it's always good to be overdressed and to make sure you're presenting yourself properly. If you need to, make sure you have someone set up who can help evaluate, make sure that you are clean, make sure that your outfits are presentable before you go into the interview. Plan your route and plan ahead so that you can be there on time. 10 to 15 minutes is always our recommendation. Please don't show up too early unless there's no other choice, but being there too early sort of makes it awkward for the people who have to entertain you for that time as well. We recommend 10 to 15 minutes early. If you're going to be late, first of all, don't be late. If you're going to be late, phone ahead though. Make sure you have the contact information of the recruiter and the person that you're doing the interview with. In a smaller company, it's usually quite easy to figure out who's doing the interview. At Walmart, so we have 1,500 people in our head office, and just showing up for an interview on any given day, we may have 50 people coming in for different interviews. So knowing who you're there to see really helps, and when in doubt, always have the recruiter's name as well. The actual interview, believe it or not, interviews are not meant to intimidate you, although some hiring managers may think that they are. Again, as I said, it's really an opportunity for you to get to know the employer and the employer to get to know you. Before you go to the interview, ask the recruiter or ask the person setting the interview what kind of interview it's going to be so that you're not surprised. You don't want to come in expecting to talk one-on-one with someone to be presented with a panel of 5 people, because then that will sort of freak you out. There are different kinds of interviews. An exploratory interview, also sometimes called an information interview. This is a chance for you to come in and talk to a hiring manager, ask them some different questions. It may be not attached to a specific job, but it does give you a chance to learn more about that occupation. I do about 2 of these a month with different people who are interested in working with Walmart. And it's a good chance for me as an employer to get to know people. Behavioral interviews are the most popular right now. These are based on asking questions that will ask for specific examples. And again, this is why it's important to prepare in advance to have your specific examples. Employers are going to be looking for you to provide them with the information that they're looking for in that question. Scenario-based interviewing. I actually use this when I hire recruiters, and what I do is I actually present them with different scenarios, ask them to go away and research how would they hire people in Red Deer, Alberta, given the current labor market. They'll go away and they'll prepare that and they'll bring that back for the actual formal interview. Scenario interviews help understand what you would do in that specific situation. Panel interviews, these are the really scary ones. This is when you have more than one person there. If the recruiter tells you that you're going to be in a panel interview, make sure you get all the names of the people who are going to be there, understand what their role is and why they're doing it as a panel. Sometimes we'll do panel interviews just to make it faster for the people that we're interviewing, because if there's 3 or 4 people that have to interview that person, we don't want to make them come back 3 or 4 times. It's not respect for the individual, so we want to move the process along as quickly as possible. Sometimes panel interviews are also used as training opportunities for other people. We may have a hiring manager bring in a high potential associate into the interview just so that they can learn more about doing the interviews. Group interviews are the opposite. This is where you have a bunch of candidates being interviewed by one or a couple of hiring managers. We've used these quite extensively when we're hiring entry-level buyer positions, which we call merchandise assistants. And the reason for this is, one, we get about 100 applications for those jobs, and because it's an entry-level position, a lot of people have the skills that we're looking for. So this allows us to move a lot of people through the interview process, meet as many people as we can, and give them an opportunity to demonstrate their skills in a variety of different situations. They'll have some role-playing and some group work, as well as some formal interview questions. Interviews can also be unstructured or structured, and I always joke with my coach, or sorry, my boss, that he's the king of the unstructured interview. He goes in with the copy of the resume and a pen and sort of goes through, and he does the same interview every single time, but it's a very casual and it feels unstructured. There's no formal flow. I prefer to go in with an interview guide and go through some very specific questions in a specific order. We both end up getting to the same place and generally asking the same questions, but it's a very different situation for both of us. One of the things in the recruiting world, in our recruiting lingo that we talk about, and I'm sure you've heard this, and if you've gone through any of your career services departments in your university, they will talk to you about this. It's the STAR approach, and this is when we're doing behavioral interviewing, this is what we as a recruiter have to look for in the answers. We want a description of the situation, the task, the action, and the result. So if I was talking about preparing for this conference, the situation would be that I was preparing to speak at a conference. The task would be actually delivering the presentation. The action would be what I did in order to prepare for that presentation, and hopefully the result's going to be that you learned something and I can go back and say that I did a good job. When you're practicing with people, when you're practicing answering questions, keep the STAR method in mind. When someone asks you a specific question, it's usually tell me about a time when, or give me an example when. When someone asks you a question, they're looking for these 4 points to be answered in that question. If you can do that for them, they're going to appreciate it, because sometimes it's hard to pay attention when you're listening focused on the answer, and then the recruiter will get back afterwards and say, ooh, I never asked about the result of that question. Don't hesitate to think about your answers. Silence is okay. Don't rush to fill a silence. Recruiters often use silence as a tactic. People will say things to fill that silence, and those are the things they say that they haven't prepared, and that's when you find out sort of interesting things about people. Ask for clarification about the question if you don't understand it. It's absolutely all right to ask them to repeat the question, format it in a different way. Sometimes we're very guilty of creating these very elaborate questions on a piece of paper that sound really impressive, but when you ask them, they're kind of muddled and they're not very clear to the person who's being asked the question. So ask for that clarification. I do recommend, though, that you don't say at the end of it, is that okay, or is that what you're looking for? Because that just sort of demonstrates a lack of confidence, and that was one of the feedbacks that we had from some of the recruiters I talked to. Another thing that we'd be looking for, and that you maybe get asked, is contrary evidence. So they may ask you to give an example of a time when you worked really successfully in a group, but then they're also going to ask for contrary evidence, and that's a time when you didn't work successfully in a group. Be prepared to talk about both kinds of scenarios using the STAR method. And it's important, if you do prepare in advance, you can talk about those weaknesses or those bad situations and be able to put a positive spin on them. So if you've rehearsed them in advance, you're not going to be taken aback by the question. In talking to the recruiters and the hiring managers, the overwhelming message is that just to remember that if we bring you in for an interview, it means that we want that situation to work out. It means that we want to do everything we can to hire you, and it's yours. The job is yours to win. So make sure you take the time to prepare yourself successfully for this. You wouldn't do an exam, you wouldn't write a paper without doing research first, and the same is true with an interview. Kinds of things they're looking for is a demonstrated interest in the company. So you're not just looking for any job, you want to work for that specific employer. Like I said earlier, I often consider it a bit like dating. You want to make sure that the employer that you're committing to is one that you want to stay with for a while. Prepare, show engagement. And what engagement means is it means being positive, showing your interest, being yourself and being enthusiastic in who you are. Don't be afraid to be yourself. Don't be afraid to say you're nervous. It's better that you say that you're nervous, and then the person will take that into account as they're going through the questions. But on the other hand, don't get too comfortable. Don't use slang. Don't swear in an interview. These are things that sound self-evident, but I have been sworn at in more interviews or had swear words used in more interviews than I care to say. Remember that an interview starts when you enter the building and ends when you leave the building. I often ask the receptionist what they thought of a person because they would have sat with that person for 5 or 10 minutes and made conversation with them. And oftentimes the assessment of that receptionist is a good indicator of who that person was. Someone who is rude to the receptionist, who doesn't present themselves well, is often not a good cultural fit for our business, and she is a very powerful role in communicating that. I've also learned some startling things from people as I've walked them out of the building. At Walmart, where we do our interviews, it's about a 5 or 10 minute trek to get to where it is. They built our home office much like they've built our stores, this great giant warehouse space. And so you sort of finish the interview and then you have casual chit-chat as you escort the person out of the building. And that's where some people have blown the interview. They may have done a great, fantastic job, but as they're wandering out of the building with me, they start saying things that are inappropriate. I had one woman I interviewed for a recruiter role who throughout the whole thing was very fantastic, gave really good answers, and on the way out she told me stories about how she fired people because she hated them, and everyone that worked with her thought that she was really mean, and her team didn't like her, and I was walking out with her thinking, I'm not going to hire you now because everyone thinks you're really mean and no one likes you. But if I hadn't have walked her out of the building, I probably would have hired her if she had just left after that. So just as an example to remember that you're sort of on the whole time you're there. The other things in interviews is just making sure that you're demonstrating that you're aligning yourself with their needs. I'm just going to read you. This is 2 really full pages of tips from the people that I talked to. But I'm going to read to you from Karen. Karen's actually our campus relations manager, and she does all of our campus recruitment, and has been doing recruitment for about 10 years now. So her list is 1, don't stalk the recruiter. It's good to phone us and ask questions, but don't phone all the time. It gets a bit scary sometimes. And then as a joke, she said, don't beg the recruiter. She says, laugh out loud, but seriously, here are some of my recommended do's and don'ts. Do arrive on time. Do dress appropriately for the interview. Neat, clean, no jeans. Do come prepared. Bring a pen, a piece of paper, an extra copy of your resume, a job description, and some company information in a binder if possible. Do smile and do a firm handshake if you shake hands. Do maintain good eye contact from the beginning to end. Avoid chewing gum or bringing any food or beverages with you into the interview. If you do need to bring something in with you, a glass of water, just let them know that that's why you're doing it. Please turn off your cell phone and any electronic devices. Again, you would be surprised at how many people I've had stand up in an interview and take a cell phone call. None of them currently work for Walmart. Do take notes throughout the interview. It's good for you to remember some of the things that were asked of you. It's a good way for you to also practice for your next interview if you remember the kinds of questions you were asked. Do be specific with your answers and avoid providing long-winded, unrelated answers, trying to keep focused and on track. Do your company research prior to the interview and prepare to answer the question, why are you interested in working with this company? Avoid interrupting the recruiter or hiring manager when they are speaking. Do have a list of your own questions, 3 to 5 max. Ask well thought out questions rather than the basic ones, like what are your hours. Demonstrate that you've put some thought into the questions. Do display a positive demeanor. Avoid bringing up negative experiences from previous employers, managers, etc. Do be prepared to be asked about your strengths and opportunities for development. Do bring with you a portfolio of accomplishments if it's applicable. Avoid using inappropriate slang in the interview. I had one the other day where someone used the word chillin' in the interview. I don't even know that that's cool anymore, so it's questionable all around. Do you have a list of employment or character references ready with you, if possible? If the interview goes well, it would be great that you can hand that over. Do thank the recruiter or hiring manager. Do send a thank you note via email or letter, thanking them for their time. It's a good way, and it does work. Not everyone does this. We all get told to do it, but not everyone does it. And again, she says, please avoid stalking the recruiter after the interview. So those are just some of the tips. If anyone's interested in that, you'll have my email address and I can share those with you. And then finally, just on the need to disclose, this is a very personal decision. I myself have been diagnosed with a mental illness, and I have chosen not to disclose to my employer, although now I have disclosed to my immediate supervisor. But what that has meant is that I have to be prepared to answer to gaps that I have in my resume. So I need to have a story that is a good story, because employers will ask you about those different gaps. So just know that you do have to sort of represent yourself in a way. Recruiters are very good at asking questions and getting down to details, and so just be prepared for that. It does come down to your comfort level, but also look at it as an opportunity to educate. Talk to your HR person if you have questions or if you think that you do need to. The HR people in the company are often the ones who are best equipped in order to coach the hiring manager if they do need coaching in terms of how to handle accommodation issues. Be matter of fact and be aware of what you will need. And also, sometimes preconceived notions come from a lack of understanding. I have had 2 recruiters who are visually impaired, and the first response that I had received when I was hiring these people was that a recruiter needs to be able to read, so you can't hire people who can't see. And it was just a matter of educating them in terms of, and both of them came into the organization very well versed in the tools that they would need in order to do their job successfully. And they were very matter of fact in telling me what they needed. I was able to present that to the business, and they were quite successful for us as well. So I just want to thank you very much for your time today, and I will be around, so if you have any questions or if you want to know anything, particularly about working for Walmart, we are always looking for really great people. We don't just hire people in the stores. We do have, as I said, 1,500 people working for us in our head office. So please feel free to talk to me. So thank you.